I only asked her to be my date for my ex's wedding. I didn't expect the CEO to stay and break when the vows began. I never expected the call to come from her. Not after 2 years of silence, not after the way things ended, and definitely not 3 weeks before her wedding. I was standing in my kitchen, phone wedged between my shoulder and ear, coffee going cold in my hand, listening to my ex-fiance's voice sound polite in a way that felt practiced, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed with someone else. "I'm getting married," she said, and I waited for the punchline that never came. "The wedding is in Aspen. It's small, intimate. I just wanted to let you know before you heard it from someone else." I smiled at the wall like it could see me. "Congratulations," I said, and meant it more than I thought I would. There was a pause, the kind that stretches when someone hasn't said the real reason they called yet. I knew that pause. I used to fill it for her. This time I didn't. "So," she continued, lighter now, almost cheerful, "are you seeing anyone?" There it was. "No," I said simply. Another pause, shorter this time. "I figured." I almost laughed. She always had that tone when she thought she knew me better than I knew myself. "Well," she said, "I hope you're happy." "I am," I lied, and she let the call end after a few more meaningless words. I stood there long after the line went dead, staring at my reflection in the dark window, wondering why it still stung. I told myself I was fine. I had a decent job, a quiet apartment, friends who checked in just enough, and a life that looked stable from the outside. But weddings have a way of reopening doors you thought you'd locked forever. 2 days later, my boss asked me to drop off documents at the downtown headquarters of one of our biggest clients. The CEO herself wanted them hand-delivered. I wasn't nervous until I stepped into the elevator and saw her name etched into a brushed steel plaque beside the buttons. Everyone knew her. Ruthless in business, brilliant, untouchable. A woman who'd built an empire before most people figured out what they wanted to do with their lives. I didn't expect her to be standing there when the doors opened. She was taller than I imagined, posture perfect, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked custom-made for power. Her hair was pulled back neatly but not severely. Her eyes met mine with calm curiosity, and something flickered there. Recognition maybe, or just interest. "You must be Daniel," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Evelyn Carter." Her handshake was firm, warm, human, not what I expected from someone with her reputation. We went over the documents quickly. She was sharp, asked questions that proved she'd actually read everything, not just skimmed summaries. When we were done, she glanced at her watch and sighed softly. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. I hesitated. "Sure." "Coffee?" she added, already reaching for her coat. We sat in a quiet cafe across the street, tucked into a corner booth like two people who didn't want to be overheard. She ordered black coffee. I followed her lead. "So," she said after a moment, studying me over the rim of her cup, "you looked distracted when you came in." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Don't be," she said. "It's just I notice things. Comes with the job." I smiled despite myself. "My ex is getting married." She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer. "That explains it." I shrugged. "I thought I was past it." "Most people think that," she said quietly, "until they aren't." Something in her voice made me look at her more closely. The lines near her eyes weren't from age alone. They were from carrying things, heavy things. Before I could stop myself, I said, "You?" She didn't pretend not to understand. "Divorced," she said, "a long time ago." "I'm sorry." "Don't be," she replied, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "It was necessary. We talked longer than I expected, about work, about travel, about the strange loneliness that comes with being successful in ways people admire but don't always understand. When we finally stood to leave, it felt abrupt, like being woken up from a dream. As we stepped outside, the cold air snapping us back to reality, I said, "Thank you for the coffee." "Thank you for the honesty," she replied. I thought that was it. A strange, fleeting connection. Something I'd remember later and wonder about. Then my phone buzzed that night. "Unknown number, this is Evelyn. I hope it's okay that I got your number from your office." I stared at the screen longer than necessary before replying, "Me, it's okay." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. "Evelyn, this is going to sound unusual." I smiled despite myself. "Me, you have my attention." There was a pause long enough that I wondered if she'd changed her mind. "Evelyn, I need a date for a wedding." I frowned. Me, a business thing? Evelyn, no. Personal. I sat down on the edge of my bed. Me, I'm not sure I'm your guy. Evelyn, I think you are. I exhaled slowly. Me, whose wedding? Another pause. Evelyn, my ex-husband's. I laughed once, short and incredulous. Me, you're serious. Evelyn, completely. I typed, deleted, typed again. Me, why me? Her reply came almost immediately. Evelyn, because you don't want anything from me. And because you know what it's like to walk into a room where you're supposed to look like you're fine. I stared at that message until the words blurred. Me, when is it? Evelyn, 3 weeks. Aspen, me, that's soon. Evelyn, I know. I thought of my ex's voice on the phone, of the way she'd asked if I was seeing anyone, of the lie I'd told. Me, what are you asking exactly? Evelyn, come with me. Be my date, smile for the cameras, leave when it's over, no complications. I hesitated. Me, and after? Another pause. Evelyn, after we go back to our lives, I knew better. I really did. But something about her honesty, the lack of pretense, the quiet vulnerability beneath the power, it pulled at me. Me, okay. The 3 dots appeared instantly. Evelyn, okay. Me, okay. She sent a single message back. Evelyn, thank you. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept circling the same thought. I was going to attend my ex's wedding as a date to a woman whose life existed in a completely different orbit than mine, and I had no idea how either of us would come out the other side. The plane descended through a ceiling of white, the mountains rising like silent witnesses beneath us. Aspen looked unreal from above, all snow-dusted rooftops and winding roads carved into the hills. I'd never been somewhere that felt so beautiful and so intimidating at the same time. Evelyn sat beside me, composed as always, flipping through emails on her tablet like this was just another business trip. She wore a cream-colored coat, understated but elegant, the kind that didn't need a logo to announce its price. Every so often she'd glance toward the window, her reflection faint against the glass, eyes thoughtful. You okay? She asked without looking at me. Yeah, I said automatically, then corrected myself. I think so. She nodded, accepting that answer the way she accepted most things, without judgment, without prying. At the lodge, everything smelled like pine and polished wood. A fire crackled in the massive stone fireplace, guests laughing softly around it, wrapped in scarves and expensive winter wear. As soon as we stepped inside, I felt eyes turn toward her, not openly. Just enough to notice, she felt it too. Stick close, she murmured, her hand brushing mine. Not because I need protection, because people assume things when you don't. I swallowed and nodded. The room they'd booked for us overlooked the mountains, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a view that looked painted rather than real. I stood there for a moment after the bellhop left, taking it in. This is insane, I said quietly. She smiled faintly. You get used to it. I don't think I want to. That made her laugh. A real laugh, surprised and warm. Good, she said. Neither do I. The first event was a welcome dinner that evening, small as promised. Too small. The kind where everyone noticed who arrived with whom, where relationships were already mapped out in everyone's minds. Evelyn slipped her arm through mine before we entered the dining room. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be. The conversations paused just a beat too long when we walked in. Then smiles bloomed, polite, curious, evaluating. Someone leaned in toward someone else. Whispers moved like a breeze. I felt it then, what it meant to be her date. Not just arm candy. A statement. Her ex-husband stood near the head of the table, tall, silver-haired, effortlessly charming. He turned as we approached, his smile freezing for half a second before reforming. Evelyn, he said, stepping forward, you look, well. She smiled, calm and perfect. So do you, Richard. Congratulations. His gaze shifted to me. And you are? She didn't hesitate. Daniel, my partner. Partner. The word landed heavier than I expected. He extended his hand. I shook it, meeting his eyes. Nice to meet you. Something unreadable passed between them, old history flickering in a look that lasted a fraction too long. Then he stepped back, gracious as ever. Welcome, he said. We're glad you could make it. As the night went on, people talked to me like I was an extension of her. Questions masked as compliments, subtle tests. I played my role, smiled, answered vaguely, stayed close. At some point, someone asked how we met. Evelyn glanced at me just for a second. At work, I said smoothly. We started talking. It grew. She squeezed my hand under the table. Later, on the balcony outside our room, the cold biting enough to keep us awake, she leaned against the railing, looking out at the lights below. You were good tonight, she said. You warned me, I replied. I prepared. She smiled, then went quiet. I didn't realize how much this would affect me, she admitted. I turned to her. You don't have to pretend with me. Her shoulders loosened at that. I thought I'd won, she said softly. When I built my company, when I became someone people admired, I thought I'd proven something. And now? And now I'm standing here pretending I don't care when part of me still does. I didn't know what to say, so I said the truth. It's okay if you do. She looked at me then, really looked, like she was seeing me for the first time without the filter of necessity. Why are you so kind, she asked. I don't think it's kindness, I said. I think it's recognition. The next day was worse. The rehearsal. That's when I saw her, my ex. She stood near the aisle, laughing with a bridesmaid, her hair pinned up just the way she used to do when she wanted to feel elegant. For a second, my chest tightened. Evelyn noticed instantly. That's her, she said quietly. Yes. She studied her, not with jealousy, but curiosity. She's beautiful. She is. Evelyn nodded, then did something I didn't expect. She straightened her shoulders and took my hand, not possessively, but reassuringly. Stay with me, she said. I am. My ex saw me a moment later. Her smile faltered, confusion flashing across her face before she recovered. She whispered something to the woman beside her, then walked toward us. Daniel? She said, surprise and something else, something sharp in her eyes. I didn't know you were coming. I almost didn't, I replied honestly. Her gaze slid to Evelyn, then back to me. And you are? Before I could answer, Evelyn spoke. I'm Evelyn. No last name, no title. Just her name, my ex nodded slowly. Nice to meet you. You too, Evelyn said, her tone warm but unreadable. There was a beat of silence. I'm glad you came, my ex said finally, though it sounded like she was trying to convince herself. I hope you're happy. I met her eyes. I am. This time, I didn't lie, she smiled brittle. Good. When she walked away, I exhaled shakily. Evelyn leaned closer. You okay? I think I just closed a chapter, I said. She smiled softly. That's what weddings are good for. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, we sat by the fire in the lounge, shoes off, exhaustion settling in. This was never supposed to be real, Evelyn said suddenly. No, I agreed. And yet, she continued, staring into the flames, I don't want it to end tomorrow. My heart thudded. I turned to her. Evelyn, I know, she said quickly. I know the rules. I set them. I just needed to say it out loud. I reached for her hand, tentative. She didn't pull away. We don't have to decide anything tonight, I said. She looked at me, eyes reflecting firelight. Will you stay for the vows tomorrow? I nodded. If you want me there. I do. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and steady, covering tracks, quieting the world. And for the first time in a long time, neither of us felt alone in the silence. The morning of the wedding arrived quietly, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest before something irreversible happens. Snow fell in soft sheets outside the windows, muting the world, turning everything clean and white like a promise no one had made out loud. I woke before Evelyn did. She was curled slightly toward me, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of her presence. For a moment I watched her breathe, steady and calm, so different from the controlled strength she carried while awake. In sleep, she looked unguarded. Human. I wondered when pretending had crossed the line into something else. She stirred and opened her eyes, blinking as if orienting herself to the reality of where she was. Morning, she said softly. Morning. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Today's the day, she said, not with dread, but with finality. Yeah, she sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. You don't have to come, she added, though her voice suggested the opposite. I told you I would, I said. I'm not backing out now. She looked at me then, something fragile flickering behind her eyes. Thank you. The ceremony was set outdoors, surrounded by mountains that felt ancient and indifferent to human drama. White chairs lined the aisle. Guests murmured quietly, breath visible in the cold air. Soft music played somewhere unseen. Evelyn stood beside me, elegant as always, dressed in a deep blue coat that contrasted sharply with the snow. She didn't look like someone attending her ex-husband's wedding. She looked like someone standing at a crossroads. When the bride appeared, my ex, radiant and smiling, a hush fell over the crowd. She looked happy, truly happy, and instead of pain, what I felt was something close to relief. This was no longer my story. Richard stood at the altar, eyes shining, his joy unfiltered. When he saw Evelyn in the front row, something shifted in his expression. Surprise, then something else. Regret, maybe, or simply memory. The officiant began. The vows were heartfelt, thoughtful, words about partnership and growth and choosing each other every day. I watched Evelyn as much as I watched them. Her face was composed, but her fingers curled slightly into her palm like she was holding something in. Then Richard spoke words meant for someone else, promises meant for a future that didn't include her, and I felt her hand find mine. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. When the vows ended and applause rose around us, Evelyn exhaled long and slow like she'd been underwater and finally surfaced. "It's done," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "It is." At the reception, she was gracious, polite, smiling. She accepted congratulations from people who didn't quite know what they were congratulating her for. I stayed close, a quiet anchor in a sea of champagne flutes and laughter. At one point, Richard approached us. "Evelyn," he said, voice careful, "may I?" She nodded, and we stepped aside slightly, still within earshot. "I'm glad you came," he said. "You look happy." She held his gaze. "So do you." There was a pause, heavy with everything they didn't say. "I hope," he continued, "that someday you'll forgive me." She smiled, small but sincere. "I already have." His eyes flicked to me. "Take care of her." I nodded. "I will." Evelyn stiffened just slightly, then relaxed again. After he walked away, she turned to me, eyebrows raised. "Did you hear that?" "I did." She shook her head in disbelief. "Life is strange." "Yes," I said, "but honest." We slipped out early, unnoticed by most. The cold hit us instantly, sharp and clarifying. We walked in silence back toward the lodge, snow crunching beneath our boots. Inside, the fire was still burning low. The place felt empty now, like the echo after a song ends. Evelyn stopped near the fireplace. "So," she said, "this is where it ends, the deal." I swallowed. "It doesn't have to be." She looked at me, searching. "Daniel, my life is complicated. So is mine." She let out a quiet laugh. "I'm a CEO with a public image, expectations, 1,000 eyes watching every move I make. I'm not asking you to give any of that up," I said. "I'm asking you not to walk away from something just because it scares you." Her eyes glistened. "This wasn't supposed to be real," she whispered. "I know," I said, "but it is." She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint tremble in her hands. "What if this hurts?" she asked. "It might," I said honestly, "but what if it doesn't?" She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them, resolve settling in. "Stay," she said, "not for the role, not for appearances. Stay for me." I didn't hesitate. "I'm already here." She kissed me then, not rushed, not desperate. A kiss filled with intention and choice and clarity. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine. "I don't want to go back to pretending," she said. "Neither do I." We left Aspen the next morning together, not as a contract, not as a performance, but as two people choosing the uncertainty ahead over the safety of distance. Months later, headlines would speculate, photos would circulate, people would talk, but none of them would know what it really began as. Not the phone call, not the wedding, not the vows she stayed to hear. It began the moment two people realized that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop pretending you don't care and choose to stay.